Okay, good morning and welcome. We're very happy to have with us today the Secretary of Public Safety, Tom Turco, along with Terry Reddy, Undersecretary of Department of Public Safety, and Peter Ostrowski, State Fire Marshal. Before the Secretary gives his opening remarks, I want to mention a few things and also have an opportunity for people to introduce themselves. Public safety is a fundamental responsibility of government, and to do that, we need to ensure that law enforcement, our prosecutors, our district attorneys have the tools they need to ensure that the public is safe, that those who are repeated offenders are not on our streets. That's primary importance. That's one of the priorities that whether you go from the tip of the Provincetown to the border of New York, everyone is concerned about public safety. On April 13th of 2018, Governor Baker signed the Criminal Justice Reform Bill, made it law, and the purpose of that legislation, nationally renowned, focused on treatment, rehabilitation, diversion, and giving people a second chance. However, it should be known that this proposed legislation by Governor Baker does not diminish in any way the great work that was done with criminal justice reform. It enhances the criminal justice reform by giving those who are charged with protecting the safety of the public the tools, as I said, that they need. Again, before the Secretary's remarks, I'd just like to start with you, Speaker Pro Tem Haddad, if you could just mention who you are.
Pat Haddad, represents Somerset, Swansea, Dayton, and Pipetown. Carol Fiola, representing Fall River and Freetown.
Paul Schmidt, State Representative, representing parts of Fall River, New Bedford, Freetown, and Westport.
Jim Hawkins, State Rep, representing Attleboro.
Brian Merrick, Legislative Director, Executive Office of Public Safety.
Hi, Linda Haskins, member of Bristol County for Correctional Justice.
Brian Haskins, same.
Jennifer Lorenzo with Senator Michael Roderick's office.
Evan Manchester, WSAR.
Chief?
Al Dufan, Chief in the Fall River.
John O'Malley, DOC in the office.
Chief?
Fall River Fire Chief John D. Lynch.
Adrian Hatch, Executive Office of Public Safety.
Right. I know that there are a number of representatives from different legislative offices. Mike Pereira.
Mike Pereira, Fall River Police Officer, representing Massachusetts Coalition of Police.
Quinn, Bristol Secretary.
Right. Okay. We thank you all for being here, taking time out of your schedule to hear the important information today. Secretary?
Thank you, sir. I want to welcome everyone here today. I appreciate the opportunity to come down and speak amongst all the local representatives here down in Fall River, especially Bristol County. We've been having continuous dialogue with Rep. Haddad and the local legislators regarding MPTC. I'll get into a little about that in a minute, but I want to thank D.A. Quinn. He's been instrumental as part of the criminal justice reform on the sexual assault evidence kits in clearing up all the Massachusetts backlog, and we continue to make some headway with that. I hope that will be in full compliance within the next few months. We also are working on a DNA database. That should be complete as well in the next, next few months. We've made a lot of headway with that. Criminal justice reform has been a big part of the governor's agenda. There is a lot of good aspects to it. We're still working through some of the aspects as far as enhancing the services, and DOC is a big part of that, and I know there's some individuals here for corrections. The Department of Corrections has worked real hard on coming into full compliance with the criminal justice reform. We're working very hard through the governor's office with dangerousness and some other legislation that hopefully will enhance public safety. Terry Reedy here is one of my undersecretaries. He's the Undersecretary of Law Enforcement, primarily oversees the state police and the Mass Police Training Commission. Brian Merrick is, he's the Director of Legislative Affairs out of the EOPS office. He does a tremendous job in bringing these types of groups together, especially where we have an opportunity to acknowledge and really discuss all the positive things I think we're doing at the EOPS level, especially under the Governor and Lieutenant Governor's leadership. Terry comes from a diverse background. I worked very closely with Terry when he's Assistant District Attorney out of the Worcester District Court under Joe Early's office. He was also an Assistant DA out of Suffolk County, and prior to coming to EOPS, he was an Assistant Attorney General for 4 years prior to coming over to us. So he brings a big, diverse background. He understands the issues at hand, especially when it comes to law enforcement and reintegration and reentry. So Terry's background is very, accommodating to what we're looking to do, especially with criminal justice reform. Andrew Peck is another Undersecretary of Criminal Justice. He primarily oversees the Parole Board, Sex Offender Registry Board, and the Department of Correction. He was an Assistant Chief Probation Officer at Worcester Superior Court. He became a Chief Probation Officer out in Hampden County, and then he became the Regional Statewide Director of all the Superior Courts prior to coming over and working at EOPS. Jean Benacasa. Jean actually played a huge role down the Cape most recently after the tornado. She was assigned there for the 5 days of cleanup. Fire Marshal and Jean worked very close on restoration and trying to get the Cape up and running in an expedited manner. Jean is the Undersecretary of Homeland Security. She comes with a very diverse background in emergency management and emergency services, EMS. And then last, we have Kerry Collins. She's the newest addition to the EOPS staff. It's Undersecretary of Forensics and Technology. Her background, she's an attorney, and she also was responsible for the sexual assault evidence lab for the state, run by the state police. So we pretty much, we have a very diverse, educated staff and to deal with some of the issues. And I believe, the issue at the Cape was having a tornado in the middle of the summer was a major issue. The governor made it very clear that the Cape could not be shut down for a long period of time. So we acted very quickly, and we were able to form and bring together various groups amongst state services, from emergency management crews, state police, MEMA, fire services, the Department of Corrections. We were able, National Guard, and we were able to get down to the Cape and work outside of what the scope would have been, due to the fact that it was a major emergency at a critical time for operations at Cape Cod. One of the things that, the biggest piece is down in Bristol County. We had a meeting a few months ago, Mass Police Training Committee, about bringing an academy down to Bristol County. We understood what the issues were. A lot of the chiefs were very vocal that they couldn't get their officers trained in an expedited manner. And there was an article in the Globe a few weeks ago that talked about the lack of trained quality police officers and the inability to get them trained under those circumstances. And civil service is a big part of it, in trying to establish an academy that runs around civil service. Because civil service is a process. You have to take the test, you have to apply for the test, take the test, then you have to be vetted out and screened. A lot of times, for individual departments, it doesn't all come together at the same time. So we're working with, we have a new director of the Mass Police Training Commission, that is Bob Ferrulo, retired Woburn Chief. He's been a trainer at the academy for quite a few years since his when he was a chief and through his retirement. He's now the acting director. He's working very close with George McNeil, the chief of Somerset. And we're working really hard about trying to get an academy structured here in Bristol County for the local departments and law enforcement. I feel very comfortable and confident that we're going to get that done. We're going to use some layover resources. There was a $2 surcharge that was passed, I believe, last year in the legislature, that allows up to $10 million of funding for continuous training for law enforcement, as well as new training for new recruits. And we're going to use that money we're going to watch that very closely, so that we have the first 2 quarters in. I mean, I believe we're doing well with it on what's coming in the initial amount. But hopefully to get these academies and get every county represented, and at least have academies run staggered within 30 miles of each community. So we're working very closely with MPTC and George McNeil in this county, and I believe they have continuous conversations on how that's gonna happen. Outside of that, we have the dangerousness bill. The governor put the dangerousness bill in. We testified before a joint committee probably about a month ago. My background is trial court. I worked 27 years in the trial court as a district court probation officer, juvenile court probation officer. I was a probation officer in charge of 2 different counties, Hampden and Worcester County, where we worked very close with alternative sanctioning and graduated sanction. And so I have a pretty good idea of, you know, that area there. Working in the Superior Court as a chief for my last 12 years of the trial court, we got to work very close on some of those hearings, especially with some of the individuals that have come before the court. And, you know, the bail statute, the way it's set now, doesn't give, there's a lot of holes in it and a lot of discrepancies, whether or not we have an ability to appeal to a higher level. So if you go for dangerousness, and Terry's gonna speak further on this, but part of the GPS statute, GPS is a valuable tool. However, if someone was to cut GPS off, all it sends an alert that the individual has tampered with the system, a warrant's issued for that person's arrest. It doesn't take the dangerous person off the street. The enhanced feature with the governor making that a felony is very important. I think there has to be some hold and some repercussion for that type of behavior. As far as probation goes, we've sat in many hearings, and for dangerousness to work, and it's the charge that's currently in front of the judge at the time of the issue. Dangerousness now in the enhanced bill allows a look back into the criminal history of the individual. I think that's very important. On the probation side, if you're on Superior Court probation and you're held on and you're placed on a pretrial type probation, there's some significant matters to a pretrial on a Superior Court level. And I think this bill clears a lot of that up. And, you know, based on dangerousness, I will let Terry further discuss dangerousness, and then I'll wrap up.
Thanks, Mr. Secretary. Again, my name's Terry Reedy. I'm under Secretary for Law Enforcement. I've been in this position since January of this year. And I want to thank everyone for having us. I was looking forward to coming down here and speaking to you all about dangerousness bill. I've been a prosecutor, or was a prosecutor, for 20 years. I started in Suffolk, the Suffolk District Attorney's Office as an intern, probably about 6 months after Paul McLaughlin was murdered by a gang member in Boston. What I saw in the start of my career was people that were shattered, you know, after Paul was murdered. He was an assistant attorney general assigned to the Safe Neighborhood Initiative, working in collaboration with the Suffolk DA's office. And what I saw were a group of people that were focused on making lives better for some people in some of the most hardened communities in Boston. And they just kept building upon Paul's memory and focusing on identifying who the most dangerous individuals in a community are and making sure the public is safe and getting those individuals off the street. So I worked in Suffolk as an intern starting in, I think it was like the beginning of 1996, and I started as a prosecutor in Dorchester District Court starting in 1999. And I worked in Dorchester District Court, Chelsea District Court, and then I was a member of the gang unit in the Safe Neighborhood Initiative for many years. And my focus was the Bowdoin and Geneva area of Dorchester. So I have a significant amount of experience in the courtroom, in District Court and in Superior Court. And in 2007, Joe Early became DA in Worcester County, and he wanted to create a gang unit. And in my opinion, Suffolk had a really good model, working with the community, working with community partners, working with law enforcement, and trying to focus on some of the most at-risk youth in a given city or in a given area. So in 2007, I became chief of the gang unit in the Worcester County DA's office, where I handled all gun cases and managed a team of prosecutors who handled gun cases, other crimes of violence. I handled murder cases, worked collaboratively with community partners and law enforcement partners. And in 2015, Attorney General Maura Healey wanted to revamp her major crimes division and with a real focus on large-scale drug trafficking networks and focusing on the fentanyl problem and the opioid problem. So for about 3.5 years, I ran a unit that's what we did. We identified large drug trafficking organizations and identified them, investigated them, and dismantled them with local, state, and federal partners, including DA Quinn's office, where we were fortunate enough to get a COPS grant for a significant amount of money that we could use and work in different DA's offices across the state. And I know they made really good use of the initial funds, and they're still, since I've left, have had a lot of success. So it's building on collaborations. So that takes me to my position on 58As. I can't tell you how many 58As I've done in my career, district court and superior court. And they're holes. They're holes in the old statute. There's holes, like the secretary indicated, in regards to what the purpose of bail is, and then what the purpose of bail is and how can it affect public safety. How can it affect making sure individuals who should be on the street are on the street, and individuals who are violent and who are threats to the community are taken off the street for public safety. No.
What's a 58?
58A is a dangerousness hearing, and I'll get into that in a moment. But I want to echo a couple things Representative Sylvia said, because he's right on point. It's tools. It's giving law enforcement officers, it's giving prosecutors tools to ensure public safety. And in no way means does this take away from the criminal justice reform that has been passed, which is important in many, many respects. And as the representative indicated, it enhances public safety. So a 58A hearing is an opportunity for the prosecutor, when they have a case, come forward at arraignment and say it's a gun case, say it's a shooting case. So under traditional bail, you have to look at the person's record. And what is bail's purpose is to ensure that this individual is going to come back to court the next time he comes back. And there's a presumption that they're going to be released. And the Commonwealth has to make a showing, well, these are the reasons why we don't think this person is going to come back to court. And there's about 14 different factors that a prosecutor can point to a judge. And then it's ultimately up to a judge to set a cash bail, or a judge can set no bail. And they have to take into account now, under recent case law, the means of a defendant to pay that bail. So it may be a bad case, meaning a crime of violence, a shooting, and that's a factor, the facts and circumstances of that particular shooting, but there are a number of other factors that a judge has to consider, with the presumption that that person should be released on personal recognizance. That's a hole. That's a significant hole. In one way...
So, excuse me, so can you say that again? So you mean that when somebody goes in, the first assumption is that they should be released?
There's a presumption of being released.
Wow.
Correct. And so, there is a statute, 58A, it's Mass General Laws 276,
Yeah, no, I know.
58A. And it allows the prosecutors to make a decision, case-by-case decision, under certain circumstances where they can ask for a detention for up to 3 days after his initial appearance, and then put on evidence to show a court, by clear and convincing evidence, that no conditions of bail will keep this individual safe, or the community safe, or the victim safe. And if the Commonwealth sustains their burden, a person can be held up to 180 days. And there's some exceptions in regards, you sometimes can go over 180 days, or some excludable time, but essentially it's 180 days, whether it's a district court, and there could be another hearing in superior court. The problem with that is that there are certain cases that you can't move for a 58A. And there was a high-profile case involving, I think it's a Lawrence police officer with a sexual assault on a minor, which, under current law, doesn't qualify for a 58A. So they had to argue under traditional bail. So that officer, there was a bail set, posted bail, and he's out. So with the governor's bill, in collaboration with law enforcement agencies, victim agencies, district attorney's offices, try to kind of close up some of those gaps, and some of those gaps are what I want to highlight for you. So right now, there are certain crimes that you can move. They have to have an element of violence or threat or intimidation, and they're enumerated in this particular statute. Again, 276-58A. What the governor's bill would assist prosecutors with is that it's not just a case in which a defendant comes to the court that could be evaluated, it could be also his record. So meaning, let's say an individual comes in with just a, an operating to endanger, which ordinarily you wouldn't be able to do 58A. But let's say he is also on his record, he's got a manslaughter conviction, or he's got an assault with intent to murder conviction. Under the governor's new bill, you can consider, you can go back and look at his record, and if it qualifies as one of the offenses, even though he's convicted, may have served his time, a prosecutor now is gonna be able to move for a dangerousness hearing. So the charge in which the individual comes to court on this particular day may not be the most serious. Police officers and law enforcement in a given city or town are gonna know this is a really dangerous guy, he's a threat to public safety. Under the governor's bill, the prosecutor would be able to look back at this guy's record, he's got a history of convictions of crimes of violence and he's done state prison time, they could move for a 58A. Another important aspect of this bill is the 180 days. So, and the governor mentioned this eloquently. If you're a dangerous person on day number 1, you're not any less dangerous on day 180, and all of a sudden you're gonna get put back into the community. So under the governor's new dangerousness bill, the person would be held for the duration of the criminal case. So you wouldn't hit that, so sometimes what you have happen in the reality in court is the defense attorney may, and again, I'm not bashing defense attorneys, they're doing their job, they're representing the defendants to the best of their ability. But sometimes they can try and delay cases. And there's excludable time, but sometimes they keep delaying, and you get to that 180 days, and then you're gonna have a traditional bail argument. And now you have that person that the judge determined was dangerous, but clear and convincing evidence, now they're getting out because that 180 day is met. So what will happen if this bill goes forward is that an individual held on the dangerousness would be held for the duration of that criminal case. Another important factor that limits prosecutors currently is that you have to move for a 58A at the time of arraignment, whether it's in Superior Court or District Court. You can move for it, you have to file the paperwork, you have to make your decision. This is an individual who's dangerous, you have 3 days to put your case together and to have that hearing. Sometimes you don't have all the information within, that day of arraignment, or even within that 3 days. Something maybe later on comes to light, some other additional evidence. What can happen now, under this particular bill, at any point during that criminal case, the district attorney's office can bring the case forward and move for a dangerousness hearing, which is a significant change from the current bill. Another aspect, and this is sometimes, it's not necessarily a probation problem, but there's a lot of cases that go through probation departments in district court and superior court. And sometimes cases fall through the cracks, unfortunately, and the results can be tragic. So let's say someone is arrested in Fall River, but they have a case out in Berkshire County. There's gonna be a system set up where the probation department is going to have to notify the authorities in the other county. Now, there is a requirement that that's supposed to happen now, and sometimes it doesn't. But this would be another way of making sure that whatever happens in Eastern Mass or Central Mass or Western Mass is gonna be communicated from probation department to probation department and notifying DA's offices so they can know that, hey, the person I have on a case that may be out on bail just committed a serious offense in some other part of the state, they should have the opportunity to come forward and bring that case forward in their respective county to move for a dangerousness hearing, move for a detention, but just at a minimum to be alerted. And I know there's been tragic consequences in this area of the state because of that lack of notification. The Secretary mentioned about cutting off the GPS bracelet. I know there's a push to avoid mass incarceration, pretrial detention. I understand that for a vast majority of individuals, bail and being out on personal recognizance or posting a bail that's the right thing to do. We're talking about a group of people that are violent, that are going to continue to create public safety risks. And what you have happened in a number of instances, I'm sure it's happened in this county, is individuals cut off their GPS for whatever reason. Usually it's not a good reason, okay? They're doing something they're not supposed to be doing, they're under the authority of the court, and they cut off their bracelet. the court is going to be, if this bill passed, there's going to be a felony charge where a prosecutor can charge in district court or indict an individual for doing that. And the important aspect of holding them responsible for that crime is that if they're convicted of it, it's prima facie evidence that bail shouldn't be set going forward on any case. Because it's an indication that they were given the opportunity to be out on bail and under GPS monitoring. They couldn't comply with that. So going forward, that's a really clear indication that whatever case they have in the future, they're probably not gonna come back. And that's also gonna help prosecutors get a higher bail on individuals that maybe not qualify for 58A. But they have a conviction for cutting off your GPS bracelet, the judge is gonna be able to consider that and kind of overcome that presumption of being released on personal recognizance. This is another really, really important aspect of the bill that probably the general public does not know. So if a bail is set on a defendant in district court, they have the opportunity to go before the Superior Court and appeal that bail and try to get it lowered. And a lot of times that happens. Not all the time, but a lot of times that happens. So it's basically a Superior Court hearing all the evidence that the district court heard and then making the decision whether or not that bail was fair. Only defendants in Massachusetts can do that. And I know this is something that's been championed by DA Galuni and DA Quinn. Why don't prosecutors have that same ability when a low bail is set? You get in front of the wrong judge at times, and I know judges have a really tough job to do. It's a difficult position, but sometimes they make mistakes and they set a low bail on someone that a bail should be a little higher on. This bill would allow the district attorney's office to appeal that bail set in the district court and to bring it up to Superior Court and have another hearing in front of the Superior Court judge to try and get that bail higher. If defendants can do it, I think prosecutors should also be able to have the same type of power and use their discretion. It's not gonna be every single case that's arraigned in any given county or in court, but the prosecutors should be able to have that same opportunity to ensure public safety. It's not about locking people up. It's not about locking indigent people up. It's about public safety. And I know sometimes that gets lost, especially in the current climate. There's gonna be a task force sent up. The people know what a BOP is. BOP's a Board of Probation Report. It's basically what a prosecutor and a defendant get at arraignment at the start of a case, and the judge looks. And it's basically giving the criminal history of an individual, has convictions, has dismissals, has the court. There's a lot of information in it, but not enough information where people can make, judges and prosecutors can make fully educated decisions on bail. So the bill proposes creating a task force to look at that and see what other information can be put on Board of Probation reports to help make sure individuals don't fall through the cracks. Another aspect of the bill is currently defendants have to be fingerprinted if it's felonies, when they're arrested for felonies. This would ensure that anyone that's arrested should be given their fingerprints. People know, people use different identifications, different aliases. Sometimes you don't know. Police officer force are dealing with individuals that they have no idea who they are. The only way to truly know who an individual is and to track their criminal history is by fingerprints. And if you don't have people's fingerprints taken at arraignment, or excuse me, upon arrest, whether it's a misdemeanor or a felony, you sometimes aren't gonna know who you're dealing with when you look back at their history. The last aspect I wanted to highlight, it was the bill also expands some of the cases that a prosecutor can move for a 58A, and that kind of goes back to that case I mentioned from Lawrence with the police officer with the sexual assault on the child, that you cannot, prosecutors currently cannot move for a 58A, a dangerousness hearing on. So another aspect of this bill is to be able to add some of those additional charges, which common sense says that's a crime of violence. A judge should be able to consider detaining an individual, and currently under Massachusetts law, you can't do it. And I think that there was an issue that DA Blodgett had up in Essex where they weren't able to detain this particular officer. Sorry to be long-winded, that's an overview. I am more than happy to talk to anyone offline if you have any questions. But personally, as a prosecutor, these are the tools that the Representative Sylvia talked about that would really help a prosecutor in district court or superior court ensure public safety. And again, I want to emphasize and echo what Representative Sylvia said earlier. It's not going back from criminal justice reform. It's about public safety and keeping individuals who shouldn't be on the street, who are causing problems, causing drama, hurting, harming families and individuals off the street. And you need to be able to give the police officers who are on the front lines and the DAs who are on the front lines these tools to make sure a tragedy doesn't happen. It's really easy to set a bail or let somebody go and they're not going back to your neighborhood, okay? But what I like to ask, and sometimes it gets me in trouble for certain judges, you wanna give someone probation, you wanna let somebody out on bail, would you do the same decision if this person was gonna be moving right next to you? Would you make the same decision if this person was gonna be moving right next to your loved ones? And if the answer is no to that, you really gotta look in the mirror, because someone's dangerous no matter where they live, if the police and the DA's office can present evidence that clear and convincing, it's gonna be determined by a judge. They have the opportunity to present that evidence to a judge and to make that determination of public safety. So I think this is a very, very important bill. I hope it passes. I know DA Quinn is an ardent supporter of this, and I think he can speak even greater detail how it affects people here in Bristol County. But I can echo from everyone else, from this new position, I've been all over the state, talking with different DAs and different assistant DAs, and the problems and the obstacles you have here in Bristol County, they're shared throughout the state, dealing with, violent, dangerous people. And it's not the entire spectrum of criminal defendants. It's a small group, but that small group drives the violence in any community, any city, any town, or any county. So I thank you. I really appreciate it. I'm sorry to be long-winded. Hope everyone could hear me. Thank you again for having me and letting me speak to you all.
So, thank you, Terry. Before I start speaking about grants, I do want to elaborate a little what Terry said on the probation side and DA Quinn. And it's really a disadvantage for all district attorneys throughout the Commonwealth. The way, what's currently in place for probation is there's through DCJIS, which is the Department of Criminal Justice Information System, we created a SOAR report, which is SOAR, which is Subsequent Offender Activity Report. If that individual is on probation in any place within the community, it shows on the current as guilty probation or continue without a finding, supervised probation. If an individual is on pretrial probation, there was nothing actually that establishes that that person's on probation on a current block. Unless the courts go in and put PTP, pretrial probation. A lot of courts will just say continuing state. What we're gonna try to do is clear that piece up. If an individual is placed on any type of pretrial probation, the only ones that really have access to that, they'll get that subsequent activity report in the morning that some police officer or somebody ran this individual's current criminal history. The courts are notified through the subsequent activity report. If it's in that court, that's great. So the district attorneys now have access to it, because probation responsibility is to notify the district attorney's office, hey, Tommy Turco just got in trouble. You placed him on pretrial probation last week, here we are. But if Bristol County Superior Court has an individual, or any district court for that matter, and they place somebody on pretrial probation, if that person shows up in Worcester County, that SOARS report is not specific to Worcester. It's only specific to Bristol. So that's where the lapse is. And unless if there's a trigger there, that there's knowledge that this person was just placed on probation, that's where the lack of communication is, and that's where the breakdown is, and that's what we're trying to clear up with this bill. And that's where probation and this committee that they're forming, this task force, is gonna come up with measures for probation and for the trial court through DC just to try to identify those individuals. And as we know that, D. O'Keefe had a case where a veteran was killed a few months ago, last summer. And there was some breakdown of communications from the trial court, the district court to the superior court that person had previous interaction in. And it's because of this SOARS report is only specific to the site that it only goes to the court that person had some activity in. That's the stuff we're trying to look into and clear up right now. So no disrespect to, to the trial court, it's just the way the system was set up. But for the district attorney, they can't adequately present the case before the court unless they have all the information in front of them that helps them in presenting issues on bail or present issues on at trial. So these are the things that we're really working hard on, and Terry did hit on all the important pieces of this bill. And having the ability, coming from a superior court, there was times, and this is just a judicial issue, you have the district court that sets bail. The defense brings that case before a superior court, and the judge in the superior court may say, well, I'm gonna release this person from on pretrial probation. They break and the DA will probably be able to, speak further on this, but if a superior court judge reduces bail, and sometimes, it's not the perfect system, but that happens quite often in a superior court level, and they put a person on GPS. That person violates GPS, and then the superior court probation is notifying the district court that there's a violation of bail because of the SOARS report comes back to us. And then the district court says, well, I didn't change that rule. The superior court judge made that decision to change it. So now we have an internal conflict between a superior court judge and a district court judge. These are the things that this legislation will help us improve on and set some standards and parameters that we can work with and really identify each case and provide give as much information to the court to make an informed decision. So that's what we're trying to do here. And again, Terry's a great prosecutor. He worked really well with the Superior Court. We did some really aggressive things in Superior Court as to Operation Nightlight, which we went into the field, into the community with local law enforcement, partnered up. And we had no shootings that summer in the city of Worcester during that grant. And these are things that we're trying to work on and take that history and take that experience and bring it back to the communities. And that leads into the grants. This coming year.
Secretary, could I just, while you're finishing up
Sure.
dangerousness, if I could just add, as a member of the Judiciary Committee,
Yes.
and to working closely with Chair Cronin, I can just say that obviously this bill is right at the forefront and obviously been looked at since the hearing and before and continues to be looked at. And I can really say today, as a member of that committee and having worked on this bill with the committee members and with DA Quinn, who has absolutely been weighing in, and we've had meetings with the chair, I can just say this for sure, that when it comes to sexual crimes, violence, when it comes to crimes against children and the 58A, you can be sure that that is pretty much at the top of the list on our minds in the committee. Now, we don't have the bill yet, we haven't, but I can just give you that piece of information today, that is a loophole that has broad-based support.
Shocking.
And it's not shocking, but I think, it's been there, we did a
When
lot
I
of
say
work.
shocking, it's shocking that that loophole exists.
Well,
Not that
it is, and that's why we're here today, right?
Yes.
That's why we're all working together to close it. And criminal justice reform brought us far ahead, and the bill that all of my colleagues here, we all played an important role in getting that done. And now we see, like everything we do, where there's loopholes, we need to close them. And so we're working closely. I know you have a bail commission ongoing through the end of the year. So some of these issues and regulations will be worked on and revealed through that commission. I know the DA sits on that. So I just wanted to share that from the committee's perspective.
No, and I do want to thank you for that. I came into this job I had an idea of what I was getting into. I wish I had a greater idea, I probably wouldn't have taken it. But working very close now in this role and working close with the legislators it's been a really valuable experience, because I can share some of my work history and my real life experiences and doing different things with the committees, and I try to build a staff around me of individuals that had those same experiences for the agencies they're responsible for. And I feel really good about that. The Bristol County delegation, I'm learning now some areas that, the loopholes as far as not having the availability of academy space. And I'm learning all this now, and that's what we're trying to actually fix. And what I really respect the most is this delegation's been very active down here, and I seen that when we met about MPTC, and I was very impressed with that. And it wasn't like, what are you gonna do for us? Why is this not happening? It was like, how can we make this better? And I do appreciate all that. Senator Roderick has been fantastic. You know, we had some great meetings across the street with him. He's really big on the municipal policing grants. Our OGR department, Shannon grants, we're going from 8 million to 11 million. And we expect we're gonna be very active with the communities, with the local law enforcement to say, how can we help you? We have $3 extra million. What can we do for each community through this money? So we're planning, I think when I spoke with Kevin Stanton in our grants department, he's our executive director, he said that he's planning on going out in September to solicit the communities. What's out there we can do to help? The Burn Jag money, we're just starting to see some realization of that money being committed to us. We have year 17 and 19, and we're working on year 18 right now. So there's a lot of re-entry grants. OGR, our Office of Grants and Research, is really actively working with DOC. What money's there to collaborate with probation? What can we do for re-entry, especially with parole, medical parole release, and mandatory parole now? So, you know, we're starting to realize that there is some resources that we hadn't seen in the last couple of years, and getting the Burn Jag monies for 17 and 19 released to us, and now with Shannon grants increase in the funding. Like I said, I had some great meetings with Senator Rodericks. He was fantastic, and Representative Cronin as well. We've had some fantastic meetings with local legislators, and especially in this community, I realized the strength that this community had. I come from Worcester County, and we've never had meetings like this. So, you know, and that's not a knock to Worcester County, but to see the investment in Bristol County was pretty impressive. I'm reachable. I have an open door policy. If somebody asks to meet with me, I meet with them, and you know, and I'm looking. And Terry especially, because this is coming from his department with the policing grants and all, what can we do to make things better? How can we effectively and fiscally responsible to use that money to improve public safety? And that's what we're working on, and I think, and Brian's really good about setting up meetings and keeping me informed. He gives me the legislative report on a weekly basis, and I thought he was talking to 2 or 3 people a week, and he gives me a list with about 20 contacts every week. So I know
He's always visiting.
So I know he's actively engaged and giving us the right information and speaking, speaking to the communities. I've made it a point I met with the Southeastern Delegation of Law Enforcement a couple of weeks ago. I met with Worcester County, Central Mass Chiefs Association at Western Mass. We're going North County, up in Northern Essex, to meet with that delegation. I'm trying to meet with all the local representatives, and I'll get into the fire marshal and how important he is to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and fire services next. But we're trying to expand police academies. We're working on an expansion for Bridgewater Complex to have a presence for fire academy down here. And I'm going to tell you just a quick story, and this couldn't come at a better time for us. Massport had some grant funding, and they went out and solicited or put out applications for 50 firefighters at Massport. Well, they're not training these firefighters, they're taking our trained firefighters to Massport, which the fire marshal, that's why he had Brown here a couple weeks ago, and then he went gray overnight when the speaker called and said, "Marshal, what's going on?" It left a big hole in a lot of local communities. Some communities lost 2 or 3 guys to Massport. We only had 2 places to train. We had Springfield and we had Stowe. And then, Boston had their own academies running. Worcester had their academies running. So we weren't able to get any other firefighter candidates. And it takes an average of 9 months to adequately train and graduate a fire academy trainee. The marshal, Dan Bennett came to me when I was commissioner of the Department of Corrections and said, "Hey, we had moved Massac Bridgewater to Plymouth. What are we going to do with that facility?" And I said, "Well, we have a lot of land there, and we have some vacant buildings." He goes, "Well, the fire marshal is looking for a location. They would like to establish a training academy and take tech rescue on the Bridgewater campus. Is this something you can do? So we sat down, they came in, we met, we identified the MassAC piece, we showed them the land, we showed them the buildings, and they went back and they did their homework and came back and said, we would like an opportunity to maybe go southeastern part of the state, and we'd like that Bridgewater complex, what can we do now? So our legal teams have been working with their legal teams, with governor's legal teams, EOP's legal teams, we're trying to put it all together. And the governor was very receptive to it, and, you know, and I don't wanna steal the fire marshal's thunder, but I'll let him move on that.
Well, thank you, Mr. Secretary. I have copies of the presentation for you and the undersecretary, but obviously the secretary already saw it because he pretty much walked through the presentation. But let me just briefly say thank you for the opportunity to be here today, and thank you for your support, and to the secretary and the leadership of EOPS for the support that you've shown to the Department of Fire Services. I have the great pleasure of working with a great team of professionals who support local fire departments. And my friend Chief Lynch is here, and he's always welcoming me to Bristol County and trying to get us more active. We try and be as active as we possibly can throughout the Commonwealth in support of local fire departments. That's our job. And Rep. Sylvia mentioned in his opening about tools, and really that's what we're here to talk about, is the tools that we provide through you. Your support enables us to support local fire departments. I meet with the chiefs regularly. We were at a chiefs meeting with the state fire chiefs yesterday, and bring the information back to the secretary through Undersecretary Benincasa and to you as we advocate for the things that the Department of Fire Services do. And that, as you know, is pretty wide-ranging. We provide tools like the Regional Hazardous Materials Response System to enable local fire departments to call upon some trained, dedicated resources for those purposes, so that we have an excellent, probably a world renowned system of hazardous materials response here in the Commonwealth. We have our Fire Safety Division that provides access to code compliance support, so that the local code compliance officer has access to an expert on the fire code and can lend support at the local level, or fire education, fire safety education. Through you and your support of the SAFE program, we're allowed to provide grants to local departments to get local firefighters in schools to talk about fire safety from K through 12 across the Commonwealth, enabling us to bring the fire deaths down and to really set the stage for fire safety education across the Commonwealth. Through our fire investigation unit, we work alongside local fire investigators to investigate the origin and cause of fires, to identify trends. Through the fire investigation unit, which is a state police organization that's assigned to the office of the state fire marshal, we work not only with local fire departments, but with local police departments and the district attorneys, from everything from origin and cause investigation through prosecution of that incident if there's a criminal activity that enables us to build strong partnerships. That's what we are. We're a support organization for the municipalities and for the local fire departments in particular. To that end, as the secretary mentioned, I want to just zero in on our fire academy and the training that we provide statewide. Local fire departments provide local training, but in addition, the Department of Fire Services through the Mass Firefighting Academy provides free training to any firefighter in the Commonwealth. In addition, we work with the Mass Police Training Committee and local and state law enforcement, providing training in areas of common interest. And the most recent example of that, obviously, is active shooter training, where we bring fire service, EMS, and law enforcement together to react and respond appropriately to those types of incidents. As the Secretary mentioned, we're working on converting the MASAC property in Bridgewater to a fire services campus, similar to what we did in Springfield. As you know, in 2015, through the support of the legislature and the Secretary's office, we were able to open a facility servicing Western Massachusetts. We have identified the southeastern area. This is a boom to fire departments in the southeast, serving Norfolk, Bristol, Plymouth, Barnstable, Dukes, and Nantucket counties, with better access to fire training, and in particular with recruit training. As the Secretary mentioned, we've been averaging about 9 months wait time for a recruit firefighter to get into the academy. In many cases, those fire service personnel, their first day on the job is at the fire academy, and they're being trained in the basics of firefighting before they can go on the job. 9 months is a long lead time, and we've researched why we're seeing that lag. We had it very close at one point with the addition of Springfield and the support that we've been able to get through the budget to run the number of courses that we run, but the application rate has far exceeded our capability. And, as the Secretary mentioned, our facilities are maxed out as well. Being able to run more classes is really now being limited by the fact that we don't have any time left in the schedule with our burn buildings and the facilities that we need to operate the recruit training. The addition of Bridgewater is consistent with the Fire Academy Master Plan that was created in the late 70s. That called for a central hub, which is in Stowe, our agency headquarters, and I know many of you have been there and seen our facility, and there's always an open invitation. But in addition, we have opened a campus in Springfield, servicing Western Mass as a spoke off of that hub, and the next spoke that we see is the southeastern campus, and Bridgewater is a key component. It really, as a personal philosophy, I really think it's a great opportunity too for us to leverage state property and to be able to take the property that DOC has operated and maintained well over the years and continue its useful service to the Commonwealth in a new life. And that new life would be a campus that would service the 6 southeastern counties in our mission. Today, we have a land use agreement with DOC for that property. We have code compliance officer working that services the southeastern region, including Bristol County, working out of there. We have our South Fire Investigation team working out of that location, and we are preparing to host our first recruit training at the Bridgewater campus beginning in late January. And we've actually rostered the first class already. So we're, through your support and through this year's budget, we have the ability to host those classes. And we appreciate the support that you're giving local fire departments through us in that process. As you know, House 3687 is the bond bill that was introduced early in this legislative session, and I want to zero in on a couple of points there. The first is, as the Secretary mentioned, one of the ways that we support local fire departments is through grants, like the SAFE grant that you've supported for 23 years now, and that we that enables us to get education into schools. In the bond bill, there is a $25 million request for a grant program to local fire departments for equipment that would go directly to local fire departments through DFS, $5 million over 5 years. This is really an extension of the program that the legislature enabled in following the loss of the Worcester Six in 1999. And sadly, we were unable to sustain that due to funding issues, but the proposal in the bond bill would be for $25 million to re-enable that process, $5 million for 5 years over the course of that bond bill. And those are direct grants to local fire departments, enabling them to get the tools in their hands. If you recall, following the Worcester Six, that program enabled local fire departments, and as I recall, I'm a career fire service personnel. I did 30 years in the local fire department, rising to the level of chief of department before I came to the Department of Fire Services. And I recall distinctly that, and I was in Worcester County, close to and in the response district for the city of Worcester, that we didn't have things, basic equipment like self-contained breathing apparatus that was within standard, and most importantly, and a tool that was used in Worcester, thermal imaging cameras. And those are a couple of examples that grant program enabled local departments to have, and those are tools of the trade. Those are things that are in the hands of every firefighter today, thanks to that program. And we need to continue that. As you know, we face the scourge of cancer and its high level of impact on fire service personnel. This will enable us to continue the good work that the legislature has started in cancer prevention areas, like equipment to allow for firefighters to have good protective equipment, like laundering services, enabling extractors and dryers to be available so that once they're in a contaminated atmosphere, they can take that personal protective gear and get it washed, where today we're re-exposing those firefighters in many cases because they don't have another set of gear and they don't have the capability to clean that. You've been very supportive of that, and this $25 million would go a long way to local fire departments being able to put the programs in place and have the tools in place that they need to address those issues. Another aspect is $10 million for the beginning of the conversion of the DFS facility at Masac. We are going to start a class there, but I will tell you that we're using a variety of strategies to be able to do that. That's really needed to address the backlog of candidates and get firefighters on the fire ground in the Commonwealth. And our team is up to that challenge. We're working really hard to implement that. But for the long term, what we know we need to have there is some infrastructure, the ability to run classes on site. Right now, our class is going to be moving about a little bit to places where we're kind of borrowing, and stealing resources to be able to get that training accomplished in order to address the backlog. But the $10 million would enable us to do exactly what we've done in Springfield and Stowe, have a purpose-built campus for those functions. Things like water reclamation system. I know that you've learned a lot about PFAS and the contamination of the groundwater supply and municipal water supplies through some of the chemical compounds. On our training sites, we collect, treat, and recycle the water used for firefighting purposes so that we limit the environmental impact. That would be a priority in this $10 million fund that's funded by the bond bill. A burn building, the ability to bring firefighters into a purpose-built and constructed building for live fire training evolutions enables us to bring firefighters from that first day on the job to be able to return to their local fire department, learn the local procedures, and be active firefighters very quickly. That 10-week course really needs a lot of hands-on, obviously, and what we're looking for in this $10 million is the ability to provide them that hands-on here in the Southeast. We provide about 300 different courses, everything from recruit firefighter, and that's for call and volunteer, as well as career fire service personnel. We have a call and volunteer program that will run this winter in Fall River as well. In Bridgewater this year as well. But we run that course nights and weekends for the call and volunteer firefighters. And here in Bristol County, we get an excellent reaction. We have a huge calling for that. But from that recruit firefighter all the way through chief fire officer training is what we provide through the Fire Academy and in support of local training efforts. So this campus is really important to us, and that $10 million would go a long way to us being able to have dedicated facilities for the Commonwealth's fire services here in the Southeast. That gets better training access. Again, if you take a look at a student from Hyannis, today they travel to Stowe for training. As you can imagine, that's a long haul. And we don't have any dormitory property on the campus in Stowe, so they're either living in a hotel or motel, or they're living in a local firehouse for those 10 weeks. That's an added expense to municipalities, as well as the lost time between those locations. This would enable us to better service the Bristol County and southeastern Massachusetts, and it will be a help to the statewide problem that we have in respect to that. So I appreciate your support of that in a couple of particular ways. Obviously, your support of the DFS budget this year enables us to get some coursework underway immediately. Your support of the bond bill will enable us to make a long-term commitment to southeastern Massachusetts and to Bristol County in particular through our efforts of getting the Masack property online as quickly as possible. And your support of the House 3956, which is the land transfer bill, is appreciated as well. I believe that both the bond bill and the land transfer bill have been heard by and received a favorable recommendation by the Committee on Administration and Regulatory Oversight. The land transfer bill has been referred to Ways and Means, so we appreciate your continued support. I think it speaks volumes about your commitment and dedication to this project in the fact that we're this early in the session and that bill has moved so quickly. And we appreciate your prompt action to that. And I know I speak for the fire service personnel to say that it really shows your support of the Commonwealth Fire Services by your actions as well as your words. So we thank you for that.
Thank you, Marshall. Just prior to taking any questions, in closing, I want to thank this delegation for putting this together. I think this is great. We're faced with a lot of challenges, especially in society today when it comes to public safety and the safety of individuals and the safety of residents, as well as the safety of law enforcement and public safety officers. And the governor has been extremely supportive of public safety and the lieutenant governor, as is this delegation. And I think collectively we can work together to come up with some solutions and reasonable expectations and measurables. The District Attorneys Association, especially D.A. Quinn, I sit on a medical examiner's panel with him. The district attorneys throughout the Commonwealth of Massachusetts have been very receptive as to what we can do to improve public safety measures, what we can do to assist and support. So I want to thank everyone for that. Just for full self-disclosure, I am very biased to public safety. My father was a police officer, my uncle was a police officer, my great-grandfather was a police officer, my son's a police officer. He's marrying into the fire family.
I don't know how you can take that.
The Worcester Six, we lost 4 close individuals to my family. One of the individuals my son's marrying into the family is Joe McGuirk. That would have been his uncle who played ball with me. Jeremiah Lucy, my mother-in-law still picks her up at 90 years old and drives her to church every day, the 2 of them.
God bless.
The Brotherton family, I grew up with my children, and we're very close to Denise and those children. And Jimmy Lyons, James was his sister was a personal friend of our family. So we lost a lot of individuals in that Worcester Six, and I get it, and it's not easy burying a loved one. Especially somebody that's within the public safety. The show of support is incredible, and I know that I was on this job for less than 24 hours, and the marshal had to call me. I got sworn in and went to Florida for 3 days to clear my head, and marshal calls me at 5 o'clock in the morning to tell me another brother firefighter in Worcester had died in a fire in the line of duty. So that's how I was baptized into this position. So I'm very supportive of the delegation's work. I'm very supportive of the full delegation here, from beginning to end, from the legislative representatives to the fire chief to the police chief and all the local communities. We're going to do the best we can to improve the services down here in Bristol County. We'll continue to work hard at that, and I think the open relationship will help us get to that point. So again, I want to thank everyone here for this opportunity.
Hey, I know that they'll, go ahead, you have a question? They're going to be available for a few minutes following for questions, but if you...
Well, thank you, Rep. Sylvia. I just wanted to thank you for pulling this together.
Well, thank you.
I don't think there's anybody in the House of Representatives who knows more about public safety than you do, so it's very
Well,
appropriate.
I
Much
thank you.
appreciated.
I thank you.
And I want to thank the Secretary, the Undersecretary, and the Fire Marshal for coming down today. It's really very educational. Mr. Secretary, you mentioned the Police Academy seats, and I know as you speak to the police chiefs down here, everybody will tell you they're all budgeted for full complement. But it's very hard to reach it because by the time they get a couple of seats out of the academy, they've lost more. So we're running hard and we're losing. So thank you for what you're doing about that.
No, and Director Ferrulo is really engaged in this, and he's been speaking to representatives down here of the local chiefs, and I believe the New Bedford chief has been very close with them. And we have a plan to try to eliminate that right away and move forward with establishing some type of presence down here. And I know they're looking at a location right now, so we're committed to helping right now.
Much appreciated.
Just to hop on that issue, in 1974, I became a member of this department and served for 22 years. There were 250 officers. Today, how many do we have, Chief?
We're at 215, but we're budgeted for 237.
So, we had a difficult time, believe me, with 250 in 1974. They have 215 now, and they never seem to ever get above the point where you have retirements, you have people out on disability, people injured, and you never catch up. So, we know Fall River, obviously, this is my home, but each and every department across the Commonwealth has the same issue. So they're always chasing that personnel, and to find that good personnel, as you mentioned, is so important.
Chief, if you don't mind me asking, civil service, excuse my ignorance on that.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's a challenge as well, trying to get these academies run, stagger the academies so we can accommodate all the civil service departments. My son was a self-pay. He was sponsored by Auburn, but Auburn was civil service, but he was self-pay. So he did it on his own, so he became a free agent, which was a lot easier. He could solicit the, and apply at the departments that weren't civil service. So that opens up, that's a big challenge as itself, and we're aware of that. So for those civil service departments, we are trying, now Joint Base Cape Cod is running an academy. Hopefully we get a presence here in Bristol. We're working on that right now. That's hopefully will help all the civil service departments, and as you said, sir, they do. A lot of the departments are aging forces. So these individuals are getting their 32 years in, they're young, they're retiring, or some are leaving at 25, 30 years with all the challenges in law enforcement today and in public safety. So we're retreating out at an alarming rate, and we're trying to supply and the demand, we're trying to keep up with that. We do have a plan. Bob Ferrulo's been working really close with Terry. We are gonna come up with a plan, and hopefully we're gonna solve a lot of these issues and get as many officers trained in a short period of time as we can.
Okay.
Sure. Joe Good for Herald News. Back to the dangerousness hearings, what I heard was you want to increase your communication between district courts regarding defendants if they're, they've got some issues in another district, and so I would imagine that would be an increase, a cost of technology.
I don't have that answer on the cost of the technology piece. I think we can, I don't think it'll be that much of a cost, because I think the infrastructure exists. It's just how we tailor it to limit that gap in the sharing of information.
Okay, and the second part of that is there'll be an increased incarceration, I would imagine. Have you budgeted for that potential?
I don't know if this is gonna come as a surprising answer or not, but incarceration rates in the state of Massachusetts are lower than anywhere else. When I came into this job as undersecretary, the Department of Corrections incarceration rate, and John O'Malley, the chief, he's got 45 years in at the Department of Corrections. He's a wealth of knowledge. But
Started when he was 1.
yeah, I guess his age, you gotta cut him in half and count the rings, so. But John has been a real supporter, and he can tell you, it goes back to 2009, John, we were over, 13,000?
Yeah. Well, 12.
12, over 12. And when I came in, we were just under 10,000. Today,
incarcerated.
Of incarceration in the Department of Correction. The Department of Correction, the last stat I heard, we were at 8,280. So there's a difference of almost 1,800 inmates there. So, and in the houses of corrections, I have the same issues right now. With reentry and through criminal justice reform, more individuals are getting out. And the reason for some of the drop is the mandatory parole piece. that was part of, for the Department of Corrections and the House of Correction for any individual that hadn't achieved natural parole. Anything up within 180 days to 120 days, those individuals are now eligible to be released under a parole supervision plan.
But under your new plan, that would change.
It could, but we're only targeting, you know, what we're talking about is to really, it's the individuals that pose a violent risk. So we're gonna be able to look back, and it's a lifetime look back now on their criminal histories. It's not gonna erase it that much. What it's gonna do is become another tool for the defense, and for the prosecution to actually do it. Will we see an increase? Yeah, probably we will. But we have the facilities, and there is a low enrollment or low incarceration rate right now, so they have the ability to handle that. I don't know how much it's gonna go up in Terry, I mean,
It's tough to put a price tag on keeping the public safe,
yeah.
you know?
Well,
When you get down
it's
to
a
it.
budgetary
And it's gonna,
Yeah, that's.
Yeah,
they're
budgetary
gonna be able
That's
to
a
cover
terrible
it, they're gonna be
answer.
able to cover, it's not a terrible answer. When
Yeah.
you talk to loved ones who are dealing with a tragedy because someone that should have been incarcerated, and when you're talking about incarcerated, pre-trial
But you could
probation,
pay for us all to wear body armor as well, that's a price.
when
tag
you're
for
talking to a
safety.
loved one who has lost someone because there's a hole in the system, because this individual, after he's had his due process, and we're talking about pre-trial probation, we're not talking about pre-trial detention, we're not talking about post-conviction. When that individual, a judge should have the opportunity to make a determination whether or not he's a danger and is a danger to the community or a danger to an individual, you know,
Yeah,
I'm biased.
yeah.
That
But
person should be off the
saying you
street.
can't put a price on public safety is
I'm talking
nothing,
about
it's a
an
non-answer.
individual.
No, I think you're talking, though, I think the question was, though, do we expect an increase in,
That's thank you.
yeah,
Thank
no, no, we don't, because the technology exists, it's just how we,
That's for the
How it's-
communication. I'm
yeah.
talking about, my second part was incarceration.
no, and that wouldn't, because the sheriffs are budgeted, and the DOC has their budget, that hasn't changed. So all it's gonna do is, if somebody goes in, it wouldn't be a price increase, it would just be another bed that would be taken up. It wouldn't be a cost that would do it. Do I think there's gonna be a lot of this? That's gonna come down to, you know, what the courts determine. There still has to be a process. Still has to be a hearing, there still has to be a move for dangerousness. All that has to exist, and all the facts have to be taken into consideration to determine whether or not that person's bail will be, you know, he'd be held without bail or be placed on a bail.
I think
So-
another important thing is that this doesn't create a new process. There's a process that's in place right now. This bill would address very serious, dangerous holes that exist in the law as it is. It would address the existing offenses in which a prosecutor could point to and say, this is a concern, I would like to raise this. Right now, under the law, the prosecutor's hands are tied, especially when it comes to crimes against children. It's not something they're allowed to do. And it also levels the playing field for the prosecutor. So when a judge says, no, I'm sorry, I'm going to deny this, they have an opportunity for appeal, the same opportunity the defense attorney would have. That is all, that is what this bill
And I
does.
understand the loopholes, I do.
Yeah.
The children, that's,
Right.
but I will say I have sat through dangerousness hearings, and they have gone back to the defendant's prior bad acts, so I
I can't.
But during the
speak-
hearing,
Right.
in order to get to the hearing,
Right.
you're not allowed. It's based on what the charge you're in front of the court for. So during the hearing, the rules of evidence don't apply. So you can use the defendant's prior history, charged or uncharged or convicted or not guilty. You can use that in the hearing. It's getting, the issue is getting to that hearing and getting that information before a judge. So right now, they're precluded.
Are there offenses, enumerated offenses in a defendant's criminal history that could, under this new proposal, trigger the danger hearing?
A lot of them are the ones that are already enumerated right now. So what the bill would do is, like, you're in front of the court on armed assault, intent to murder. Now, that qualifies, it's enumerated. What the issue is, if you're in front of the court on a charge that's not enumerated, but they have a conviction already for that offense, going back prior to, like, right at the first arraignment, being able to go back and look at those prior convictions and be able to move for the dangerousness. So that, it's subtle, you're right in regards to being able to consider a dangerousness hearing, all the information that's available, but it's getting to that hearing. Right now, DAs aren't even allowed to even get to that hearing. They're limited to just a traditional bail argument.
DA Quinn, could I ask you, do you happen to know the percentage in Bristol County of dangerousness hearings? Of your cases, the percentage?
That are what, filed or allowed or?
Or that you have gone to court? I've sat through a few.
I don't know the percentage, I think we do keep track of them. I mean, I'm just not sure, percentage of times we.
Your caseload, what, do you know the percentage of cases that do go before a judge for dangerousness?
It'd be a very small percentage if you measure it against all the charges that are brought. You know what I'm saying? Let's say there's 100 cases, just, it'd be, you know, in a court, let's say it might be a very low percentage. And then once the hearing is conducted, percentage of what a judge, judge would rule to detain the person would be something else. So, I mean, the vast majority of the cases in court are not even impacted by this. The average person goes in, there's issues, they come in, they go out. So I couldn't give you, I mean, if we have 25,000 cases in the county, let's say, 20, I mean, the percentage, it would be very low. I think the focus is on these individuals who are committing violent crimes, who are repeat offenders, who are committing crimes while out on release, which has always been a sore spot to me, for example. You come into court, you're selling drugs, you get released. Okay, that may be appropriate, but based on the record. You come back again, you're selling drugs again. You're warned that if you commit a new crime while out on release, your bail could be revoked, if the evidence is that. So those, I think the focus really is on a small segment of individuals who are committing crimes, bad domestic violence cases, gun cases, violent street assaults, stabbings, beatings, drug traffickers. That's always been a sore spot with me. Maybe not at first, someone's caught trafficking in drugs, they have a record, they have pending cases, arguably that individual's a danger to the community. We've moved on those cases to hold people pending trial with due process rights. It's all about fairness, but some of these individuals just simply do not belong out on the streets. But it's not like there's hundreds of thousands of people now that are gonna be brought into this dragnet. It adds up over time. I mean, it happens every day in the courts in the Commonwealth where individuals are released that shouldn't be. That's always been a big issue to me. You have to view each case on its merit, so you can't paint a broad brush, everybody charged with it should be held. But there's most of the cases that I see, these cases are warranted. But it's important. It's a small segment of the defendants going in that are detained in each court. And I think most of the offenses, they have to be enumerated in the statute, as was mentioned. They lay out a series of offenses. For example, I think the sex offenses that was referenced, I'll just give you a quick point. One of the offenses they're talking about is aggravated rape of a child. That means an age difference, a 40-year-old rapes a 10-year-old. If there's no element of force, if it's done and there's no force alleged, even though it's a 10-year minimum mandatory, the Supreme Judicial Court ruled earlier this year that it's not constitutional to hold someone under the statute. So that's just an example. Not mandatory detention, but if someone is engaged in that conduct, we had, I think, 4 people who were held as dangerous. So this is a court holding them, and this would be probably 2 dangerousness hearings that have been held. Initial entry in the district court, Superior Court. 4 cases now that they've been put back on the street because of the court ruling, and that's appropriate given the court ruling, but even the court in that case, that's the Supreme Court is saying that should change. So I can't give you a percentage, it's a small percentage, but it's the focus is on individuals coming in who are hurting women and children, violence, and some of these drug recidivists or high-volume drug traffickers.
The Bristol DA's office has been a leader for years in modifying this 58A statute. A number of years ago, in Massachusetts, you couldn't move for a 58A hearing for an illegal possession of a firearm. It wasn't enumerated. And it was DA Sutter and the group of law enforcement officers down here in the Bristol DA's office who led the fight to change that. And it seems common sense that if you got an illegal firearm, the DA's office should have the opportunity to move for a dangerousness hearing. Couldn't do that. And it wasn't because of the great work from the Bristol DA's office leading that change, that's not the case anymore. And that was a loophole. And the Bristol County delegation led the charge of changing that. This is similar. And again, I reiterate, what the DA said, it's not a vast amount of people. There's a number of people, I think every community's crime and violent crime is driven by a small percentage of people. It's being able to make sure those individuals aren't hurting people in any given community, whether it's Bristol County or any other county in the rest of the state. Yeah.
So say there's a defendant who's, served a sentence for one of those enumerated offenses that under this bill would allow them to be eligible for a 58A hearing. If they're picked up on like a motor vehicle infraction or something, comparatively minor, would this bill allow them to then be held as a danger?
I can't imagine that, it's tough knowing, it's gotta depend on who the defendant is, but I can't imagine, because I don't think you can be, I don't think you can be incarcerated any longer for operating after suspension.
Okay.
So I don't think that
Well, for
actually
example,
qualifies.
a comparatively.
It would give the opportunity, not necessarily that hypothetical, but it'd give the opportunity for the prosecutor to make that decision, but ultimately, that's gonna be up to a judge to make that decision. So after a full hearing where the prosecutor presents evidence, the defendant can present evidence if they want. Depends on the circumstance. I can't imagine that happening in the real world unless there's a lot of other extenuating circumstances.
If it was a violent crime, it would be a different story. It would, I'm sure that's when the DA would look at previous acts of violence, if there was domestic assault, 2 or 3 counts, and there was just an arrest for assault and battery by means of a dangerous weapon. The person, that's where we're looking at the possibility of dangerousness. Perfect.
So you wouldn't foresee this being
No, not a
in a
motor-
non-violent offense?
No,
Okay.
no, and that's why the numbers are, we're talking, as the district attorney mentioned, a small number of defendants, minority of defendants would be affected by this. Obviously, it's hard to tell, as the secretary mentioned, there's no barometer to determine if there's one shooting in Fall River, one violent act in Fall River, but there could be 10 this week. Chief hopes that doesn't happen, but that we see that can happen in different communities in the Commonwealth. So it's very much dependent on the numbers there.
I guess I would just also.
And I think that's why this legislation is so important.
I understand.
It also.
What kind of protections do you have for just that scenario that would not happen?
Well, you have a judge, you have a judicial oversight, the judges still have to make determinations whether or not a person's dangerous now or later on. They're just gonna have more information to make that decision.
Yes, sir.
Hi, I have a few questions, just to remind Brian Haskins, I'm part of Bristol County for Correctional Justice. We're very active in New Bedford, in this area, especially in regards to our sheriff right now. I have some worries, frankly, about the state being sued, should we try to put this in. If I'm not mistaken, and I apologize, I have not had the time to look this through, other states, I believe, have tried the fingerprinting for every crime and lost it. I believe it's one of those common sense things that, for example, a lot of states, and I apologize, we all know how foolish this is, have tried to do drug testing for food stamps, and every state loses money, and they end up having to crush the law anyway, because they get sued out the butt. So they just lose all this money. I don't think that we could get that through. The ACLU has already made a public statement. Do you have anything to comment on that as far as the ACLU?
I don't on that piece, but, I think what's missing here, there's a lot of police departments that already fingerprint.
All felonies.
Yeah, for all felonies, right. And I know the misdemeanor piece is gonna be a big piece of it. But that's something that's gonna have to go through legal, and they're gonna have to do it, but I do understand your concerns on it.
Okay, because when you say they fingerprint for felony, the one thing is, I as a citizen, I've been fingerprinted, I've worked at banks and stuff like that. To me, fingerprinting is no big deal, because I plan on paying for my soda when I go to the gas station. But it's the fact that you upload it to the state. Now, I just wanna make sure when we do that, does that then become information, like if someone commits a crime in another state, they can subpoena on the files on that person, is that correct?
The fingerprinting is what?
FBI.
FBI database.
Yes.
Okay, all right, so it does get up to that. I worry about that, but also a very significant concern I have is this in, excuse me, I had the section written down. 57(2)G, where it says to hold somebody for reappearances as any history of mental illness. My mother here was a social worker for a long time, and unfortunately, things we see that the court system does not always understand what mental illness is. I significantly worry that that's not any history of violence connected to mental illness, just a simple change of phrase, because the people that defend the ADA, again, I just can't imagine that they wouldn't bring this up legally. For example, to get my meds, even though I don't technically have a mental illness, it's reported to my insurance that I have. And while, again, I don't plan on like stealing or running anybody over, it would still be something that, you know what I mean? It'd
Yeah.
be something, unconnected things could be used against you in a number of
So you're
circumstances.
saying a health circumstance that's not available to the court at the time of this, or?
Correct.
Can I just,
Yeah.
a lot of meds that are considered psych meds, and it goes under a psych label, are used for off, like, some of their side effects are actually beneficial for other things. So you have a lot of people taking meds that are technically psych meds, but aren't for a psychiatric condition.
And I guess that would be the other thing,
And
where do
I-
we get the records from? Is it just, and I apologize for cutting you off, is it just like within the criminal justice system? Like, for example, you arrest somebody and they say, I'm king of all Jews.
Right.
Would you then report them as having like hallucinations?
So,
Like, is that part of the record, or do you like get their doctor's records? I'm confused exactly what that means.
So there's doctors assigned to every
yeah,
court.
there's forensics psychologists.
So if
there's a
assigned to
potential issue-
DMH and DPH.
Yeah, and the worry would be there's lots of mental illness that isn't violent, like
Right.
OCD and things
Yeah.
like that.
So I had cancer in 2010. I have a back case of neuropathy. So I take Cymbalta, and it's because it's like a
Right,
fibromyalgia
right.
drug. Would I be considered having mental illness?
Exactly.
I'm on that med, and technically, as far as Mass Health, it has to be reported as a mental illness because I only have fibromyalgia.
Well, some people might think I'm mental, but I,
Yeah.
you know,
But no, that's exactly what I meant,
Yeah.
yeah.
Right, so no, and I understand that, I do, because there are health issues that you take certain drugs so you can walk, you know, and that's one of them, so, and I know that she was big on fibromyalgia. And I've been through all different types of drugs to try to get through that, especially through the chemo and, what's it, gabapentin, all those, you know, types of drugs, so. But no, I don't, that stuff, there is, if somebody came in and presented a real serious case of mental illness to the court, somebody in the court would ask for the court forensic psychologist to come up and do an evaluation.
So the history of mental illness is based on public safety records, anything that falls within that safety, I guess.
no.
I've done, in my career, a lot of 58A hearings. I've never brought mental health records into a hearing. And as far as it being disclosed, my experience is it's impounded by the court. And even, you know, looking back 20 years and coming to the present day, there's a particular sensitivity with judges, with defense attorneys, who probably the first gateway to getting someone's services, if they're arrested on the criminal side, prosecuting officers, victim witness advocates, the judges, court personnel. So it's always been a factor dealing with mental health issues on the criminal side. But I think there are a lot more accommodations, a lot more ability to get people the services they need because of the constant training. It's not foolproof, but it's a lot better than it used to be. But if the concern is people are gonna be detained or held without bail because they're mentally ill, in a house correction or in state prison, that hasn't been my experience.
The
That's
problem
getting
is
to the
it
doctor.
allows for bad actors.
Yeah.
Like, I'm speaking to you, you clearly like understand, but
Can I speak, because I've had personal experience with someone with a cognitive deficit, which was called mental retardation at the time, that was almost held. Because the court, and this is in New Bedford, did not understand the difference between mental retardation and mental illness. And we had to get a crackerjack lawyer, and we were just fortunate that she was able to at Superior Court. This guy could have masterminded his way to take the bus to Fall River, and yet he was on trial, just due to different circumstances. And absolutely, here we are in Superior Court, and the ADA is asking me what's the difference between mental retardation and mental illness. I'm like, Charles Manson was mentally ill, but definitely not mentally retarded.
There's definitely a
So-
training and education component of
I
that, for
hope
people
so.
dealing
This
with
is
that,
that
to
long.
recognize it, yeah.
And then, you know, hopefully the defense bar would bring those issues to.
Can you just be careful with the wording on that? This isn't set in stone, right? You said
Yeah.
some things are going through legal.
Yeah, they're
Just
all,
be-
yeah.
The Worcester DA's
Just be
office,
real
and I'm
careful.
sure other DA's offices, Worcester DA's office has a doctor on staff that
Yeah.
provides
But I
training
mean, just
to
in the wording
everyone.
of this, don't create another loophole that, you know, in years to come, back to reconvene and.
Yeah, that
Just be
seems to me
careful with that.
No, understood,
a
thank
huge
you.
loophole. And also, just one last thing, I apologize for taking up so much time. And on the first page of the actual report, under section 2, for chapter 268 of the general laws, it's hereby amended by inserting after section 13D the following section, and it's legal 13E. Chapter 268 already has a 13E. Are we replacing it, are we appending it?
Or is that
I'm sorry, I don't have the actual
Oh,
bill
that
in
might
front of me,
be,
but we-
I think that was literally a clerical error, but,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm combing over this.
We'll look
with
into
fine
it.
Brian's
tuning.
fault.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I figured, but, you know.
I hate 13.
This is not finalized, this is just the bill right now?
No.
Right. That's a committee.
It goes through a number of
everything.
steps before it actually,
Can I just say, the more, I retired last year, I've gotten more involved, and I am so impressed with the state of Massachusetts and meetings like this, because I'm getting the impression, just from watching TV, that it's not like this in other parts of the country. I have found every rep, I have been a group that's meeting with Schmidt tomorrow. I have found them more than accommodating. I think the public information is just, it's incredible. I'm so impressed with Massachusetts.
Although we have a committee in Rafael, she's been having conversations with Cronin. And there's still intercommunication amongst
Right.
legislators and where they feel, how they feel about certain aspects.
But I
of
mean,
this
how the
stuff.
state comes to the public so often in many things, it's really
Well,
impressive.
they're paying us a big fee to be here.
yeah.
But it's great, you see people chasing their routes to their houses, you
No,
know?
it,
And that's
it's
not like it here at all.
predominantly, there's a lot of this going on into collaboration
Yeah.
amongst, you know, certain groups within the state. So, no, I can say, and we've been trying to make ourselves available for those reasons.
So can I just add to that, over the past, I don't know, probably close to 10 years now, I've been working with whoever has been the Secretary of Health and Human Services on mental health issues. And they don't operate in silos. Secretary Turco meets with Secretary Sutter. Secretary Sutter is extremely concerned about stigmatizing people, about making sure that police are trained to deal with people who have mental illness. So I think you're right. I think we try here in Massachusetts to be much more broad-based in how we look at things. And I've been around a little while, and it wasn't like that. Things going back several years were very, very siloed. And you couldn't get people to sit down and talk about where they intersect and how important it is for police and fire and rescue to be trained to deal with autistic, mental health, you know, all of these issues that they're very real and they're very individualized and it's not easy. So I just want to assure you that not only these kinds of conversations go on, but you meet every Friday, don't you?
We have cabinet every Friday.
Yeah, every
And-
Friday.
And I honestly, and I appreciate that as well. I speak with Secretary Sutters quite often, only because of, one, the opiate addiction, the opiate epidemic that we're all fighting right now, mental health, and, you know, other substance abuse that we're all trying to counter at the same time. And she's working really close, and we speak quite often. Her team speaks to my team a lot more than I speak to her, but I speak to her at least twice a week. And especially we're trying to work out something with the Section 35s now, and we're trying to come up with a plan for that. So we do,
Human trafficking.
in human
Because I've
trafficking.
heard you can now be sectioned into prison.
It's always, you're sectioned to a Department of Correction facility, and it's always been like that. That's the statute, how it exists now.
But we do now have a process where women are no longer put into Framingham. There are wards in Taunton, where they're getting, and we're gonna try to do the same thing with the men, which we have not done yet, but, it was about 3 years ago that Taunton began to be reopened and, be used instead of incarcerating women, and there's a lot of amazing things going on with families being reunited, mothers being reunited with children, so.
Yeah.
We're trying not
Because
to
that
make
was
it
a
incarcerated.
misstep when they closed everything, they
terrible.
had nothing to take its place, that was
Yeah.
not good.
So all the females were going to Framingham, and that lawsuit came up filed by PLS, and it was about 4 years now. Because it was when I first came in as undersecretary, and we worked on getting, it took about 9 months to get Taunton built out, so that all the females that are civilly committed will go directly to Taunton. There are other dual commitments that have open criminal matters, and that's the challenges we're faced with. What happens to them? They still go to Framingham because of the dual status, because of open criminal case. But they're getting the same type of treatment as a Section 35 component
Yeah,
to
because in
Framingham.
general, the medical facilities were very lacking, and I don't know what could be done by that, you know?
So Secretary Sudders and I have been working on that Section 35 with Judge Minahan and Judge Polacari, Chief Justice. And we're working on this mill lawsuit right now. And right now, we moved from Bridgewater to Plymouth, and we did a lot of construction there and a lot of infrastructure. And what we're working on right now, because the statute does exist, and the courts have the ability to determine if they feel the person's at a risk for flight or a public harm risk, or that there's no available beds in a DPH sanctioned facility, the judges can move them to Plymouth Massac.
Okay.
So we're trying to work with the courts and create a tiered system so that those that have open cases.
So they wouldn't go to like Bristol County House of Corrections?
No,
Okay.
no, they would stay in a Section 35 sanctioned facility, and one of the things we're working on is bringing all the level of cares. Now, Hampden County never had a Section 35 facility, so Hampden County lost a female transporting to Taunton a while back, and they have opened up a medical facility, but we're trying to raise the level of care equal to what a DPH facility is, so that everything is there. Although it might say in the statute DOC, we're trying to create that care, because the alternative would be, if we didn't have a facility like a Plymouth Massac, and this is what we're talking, and the governor's very engaged in these communications. If we don't have a facility like that, the only alternative, if you have an open case or a warrant, is to go to a house of correction. You're not gonna get the level of care Section
Oh my
35
God,
facility is
you'd
gonna
be in
provide.
solitary.
So the key is only care and custody can go to a trained correction officer, law enforcement that has care and custody provisions under the statutes. So if we take the COs out of Plymouth, and we're gonna reduce the number, that's the plan. I don't know if it's gonna happen, but we're talking about a lot of different scenarios, working with the trial court. We need the courts to comply and everybody to be on the same page, because otherwise there's no alternative. A court's gonna have to say, well, we can't send them to the DOC under the Section 35 provision because they have an open case or a warrant, and we can't put them with a civilian. What we're gonna have to do now is commit them to, if they're Worcester County, Worcester, or Bristol County, they're not gonna get the same level of care Section 35 is gonna provide. And Mary Lou Sudders is working on bringing that level of care to the highest standard.
Okay. I know the secretary and the undersecretary and the fire marshal will be here for a few more moments following this, and but we want to thank you. I also want to thank Chief of Police, Chief Dupere, for your hospitality today. And I just want to mention our delegation again, because it's always our intent to bring Beacon Hill to Fall River. And that's so important. As you mentioned, you're from New Bedford, you notice what we're doing here in Fall River, because we want people to know, not only our police officers, but the general community and firefighters to know about the details. You know, sometimes when people read things, you know, they get the wrong info or half the information. You can't get it any better than we did here today, and it is unusual in so many ways that you know, to have this kind of a presentation. So we thank you for your taking the time from your schedule.
Thank you, sir.
Undersecretary as well, and you, sir. And thank you all very much. Have a great day.
Thank you.